So Brave New World has been out for a few weeks now, and at first I wasn't going to make a video about it because I didn't think I had any profound statements to behold. And after I watched the movie, I have to say I liked it more than I thought I would, but with that said, I still don't think it was necessarily a good movie. In fact, by the time the credits rolled and I witnessed possibly the worst post-credit scene in the MCU's history, I believed wholeheartedly that I would simply forget about Brave New World by the end of the next day. And my excitement for Daredevil Born Again, or Invincible Season 3, or Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man will continue to grow and take up space in my mind. As my frustrations with the project kept piling up, mainly due to one specific resentment I have, the fact that there wasn't only a decent, or okay, or even good film hiding there. There was genuinely an excellent movie that could have come out from this, and all it needed was another 20 or 30 minutes to flesh out the narrative and a way better script that wasn't rushed into production and most likely incomplete by the time filming started. This is why instead of merely making yet another video only tearing this movie to shreds, which I'm sure you've already seen 1,000 of at this point, I want to see how we could restructure this movie into something that it should have been, and see what big or even small changes could have been made to create a Captain America movie Sam Wilson and Anthony Mackie deserved. The first main change I would make to this movie is going back to the original title of the film, which was called New World Order. And that'll be expanded upon later, but trust me, that title is the plot of this version of the film we're creating. From there, I want to get straight into the characters of the film, and most importantly, how they connect to the theme of this story. In the real version of the film, character arcs like Sam's or Isaiah's seem cut short and not fully fleshed out, and at times, especially for Sam, confusing on what they were even attempting to say for the characters. So the main theme of New World Order will be legacy. Something hinted at in Brave New World, but not exactly fully fleshed out. In our version, every character will be struggling with that exact issue of identity crisis and legacy. Starting off with our leading man, Sam will be struggling with not having the super soldier serum, something we saw in Brave New World, but not exactly explored well enough in my opinion. And to go even further with that premise, when Ross talks to Sam about reforming the Avengers, he tells him that they have finally been able to replicate the super soldier serum, with the help of the leader, but at this point Sam doesn't know that. Ross then tells him that Sam can have the serum if he decides to agree to reforming and leading the Avengers under his rule. Thus, the whole movie that offer is lingering over his head as he gets his ass handed to him time and time again, questioning himself if he needs the serum or not to be Captain America and keep that legacy alive. I also want them to lean heavily into Sam's past as a VA volunteer and use his ability to speak to people and solve situations through communication, which makes his scenes with Ross more difficult because communication is not that man's strong suit. In regards to Ross, I loved how much of an antagonist he was in Brave New World, and obviously he's an antagonistic personality, so it was expected of him to be a dick. But I didn't think they would make him almost a secondary villain in a way. It's an idea I think New World Order should keep, but also intertwine it with what the marketing seemed to be, which was more of a team up with Sam and him. But just like Brave New World, Ross's main motivation will be getting this treaty signed, but it will not be said a billion times. And of course trying to have Betty come back in his life. With Ross, we're pretty much keeping the same character arc, but going about it differently. At the beginning, instead of throwing out that awkward exposition line about Betty being his daughter to his assistant, they could have him try to call her and she doesn't pick up, with him having to leave a voice message and him telling her I love you and that he wants to catch up. And throughout the film, they can keep going back to small moments of Ross attempting to reach out to Betty instead of the one time we see it in Brave New World. In regards to the adamantium and the treaty, that is still a goal of Ross's, but in New World Order, we make the Betty relationship take front stage. Speaking of Betty, she would be sprinkled throughout the movie in person. Immediately after the assassination attempt on Ross, she goes to see him, and even though there is concern for him, the tension is still there, especially when she overhears that Ross is going to be putting Isaiah into custody, which could possibly place him onto death row, as him and Sam have an argument over it, with him explaining that Isaiah has clearly been corrupted and Ross making the statement of Isaiah having every reason to make an assassination attempt. The two go back and forth in front of Betty as she starts to take Sam's side, as it makes the most sense, especially when the other agents were compromised and are reciting the same experience that Isaiah had, but not remembering anything that happened. Betty speaks up, telling Ross that he can't think like a general anymore, but a president, making him pause and look at her, trying to prove that he's changed for her, and looks at Sam, deciding to accept the possibility of something larger than life happening. Betty and Sam leave the room and they have a conversation about the father and daughter relationship they've had, and Betty gives Sam a cautious warning about working with Ross, making him once again question if the serum is worth taking or not. But Betty would have a few more scenes in the film after that one too, to actually establish her as a character, with her motivation being a voice of reason for Ross to reconsider his actions in the moments of confrontation with others. Now, that leads us to our two main side characters, Isaiah Bradley and Joaquin Torres, and in New World Order, Bradley will not be sidelined for the whole movie, but instead will be a major player, especially in pushing the theme of the movie. Joaquin will basically have the same journey he had in Brave New World, but Isaiah will have much more to do. After he gets locked up, he won't be there for the whole movie. More specifics on that later. But his journey is of not wanting to be the forgotten Captain America and finding self-peace and being able to move past his trauma and not let the world forget him, but instead rise up and be a symbol for change that anyone can get through immense pain and come out the other side stronger than ever. Wanting to actually have an impact, wanting to actually have a legacy. As he comes to terms on why Sam has decided to take up the mantle and decides to help him find the leader and show the world that he isn't just some broken experiment, and prove to all that wronged him that he is a better person as he comes out of the shadows and shows them that they cannot break him. And now, before we get to the big bad, let's speed run through the rest of the smaller characters. Giancarlo is completely cut in New World Order. This is probably the thing in Brave New World that pissed me off the most. It's not that Giancarlo gave a bad performance, because he didn't. He actually gave a good one. But it's such a waste of him as an actor, and now I'm mad that he's probably not going to be able to play any other character in the MCU. Which, man, him as Charles Xavier or Magneto would have been absolutely incredible. I'm actually hoping they retcon some shit and make Sidewinder actually be some other bigger character so we can get him in a proper role. Another character that is cut is the Little Black Widow. She did literally nothing in the movie, so we can get rid of her. We're going to get rid of Ross's assistant as well and replace her with an unnamed vice president character. But something I want to not only keep, but actually expand upon is the Serpent Society, which Giancarlo Sidewinder is the leader of. But what we'll do is have the main roster of the team, but they're headed by Sharon Carter. And the super soldier serum she was selling in Falcon and Winter Soldier comes into play in a big way. But she, of course, just like Sidewinder was in Brave New World, is working for the leader, taking Giancarlo's place. And the person she was talking to on the phone at the end of Falcon and Winter Soldier was, in fact, Samuel Stearns, who was creating all the super soldier serums we saw on that show and distributing them to terrorists. And the Flag Smashers, well, they were an experiment of his. And if you remember how at the end of the show, when Sharon reveals she's the power broker, she tells the person on the phone that she's going to find new buyers. So, she has been supplying super soldier serum to many people across many other countries for the leader. And the Serpent Society is souped up on special serums specifically made for them by Stearns. There's going to be a big change to them from the comics though. They're all ex-government agents that have been wronged, maybe even ex-SHIELD agents for that matter. And since Sharon became the power broker due to her loyalty to Steve, she feels betrayed by her government after secretly working for Hydra and then being hunted down for feeling like she was doing the right thing by helping Cap. She gave her entire life for her government and they turned her into an enemy. Something the Serpent Society can relate to. Something the leader exploits. Which leads us to our last character, the big bad himself, Samuel Stearns, aka the leader. First off, we're keeping the original design because it's beautiful, absolutely perfect, and the Brave New World design makes me want to harm someone. But onto his plan in this movie, it will be similar but much larger than Brave New World. He still wants to destroy Ross's legacy and will turn him into the Red Hulk. But here's where the title of New World Order really comes into play. Because Stern has been using the Serpent Society and Sharon Carter to distribute his super soldier serums into governments all around the world, with people that work for their governments having enough of the current world order and wanting a new one. One where they aren't taken advantage of. One where they aren't used as pawns. One where they are in charge. And with tensions of Tiamat causing countries to easily become at odds with each other, the leader uses that to his advantage, having his government agents across the world all using their pull in their governments to cause all the countries to go against each other. The thing is, I love the fact that there's no world-ending scenario in Brave New World, and I want to keep that, but the problem is the only next logical step for the leader is to basically cause World War III. So, I thought of a great way to turn that into his advantage and not cause an end-of-the-world situation. But, more on that later, because now, we're getting into the actual narrative structure of the film, starting with the opening. The opening to New World Order would be very similar, except Sam is tracking down Sharon and the Serpent Society, not for taking adamantium, but distributing the super soldier serum. But Sam doesn't know this until Ross tells him about the new Avengers initiative. Sam ends up fighting Sharon, who with the rest of the Serpent Society get away, leaving behind the vials of serum in a titanium briefcase. After Sam and his team secure the case and leave Mexico, we see Sharon make a phone call to her boss, telling him what happened, and we get our first introduction to Samuel Stearns through his voice. From there we get reintroduced to Joaquin and Isaiah, but this time the two of them already know each other and are friends, and they're with Sam and all three of them are hanging out at Bradley's gym, as Sam and Joaquin talk about their mission to Isaiah. The three of them joke around for a bit, and then Joaquin tells Bradley how they could have used his help. And of course Isaiah brushes it off, but Joaquin keeps pushing it to the point where it stops being a joke and he's trying to get him to join in on what they're doing. Sam tries to redirect the conversation as he sees Isaiah getting irritable, but Joaquin can't read the room, so he goes further until Isaiah snaps on him and then gets up and walks away. Right when Sam stands up to go follow him, he gets a phone call from Ross, and he steps aside, giving Joaquin an irritated look. When he picks up the phone, in the background you hear a ding of another phone notification, and you see Bradley, out of focus, pick it up with 3 quick flashes coming from his screen. Ross and Sam continue talking, and he invites him to the White House, and just like in Brave New World, Sam wants to invite Isaiah, but he looks behind him to see how Bradley is holding up. And he looks a bit disassociated. Ross gives the okay on the invite and thanks him for his earlier mission. When Sam cautiously tells the three of them about the White House party, Bradley does not get upset and immediately agrees to it, which throws Sam off guard that it was that easy to convince him. And we can go ahead and keep the whole suit was from his wedding theme because that was honestly really sweet. They get to the White House and everything pretty much plays out the same up until after Isaiah is arrested, except we introduce the vice president who is on friendlier terms with Sam than Ross is. After the assassination attempt, we get the same scene from Brave New World where Sam and Isaiah have that talk in the prison, then he goes to see Ross. The other countries don't back out of the treaty, but instead want to reschedule another meeting, but make it clear to Ross that he really needs to impress them. 2 of the countries begin to explain that they have important military defensive meetings coming up, and we find out most of the countries right now have some too, which makes Ross a bit confused at the coincidence of all of them having similar meetings at roughly the same time. They hang up and Ross begins to have a conversation with his VP when Sam walks in, trying to start a conversation with Ross about Isaiah and how he believes mind control is at play and that he's trying to protect Ross from anyone else that could be compromised. They begin to have an argument and Ross's vice president is trying to intervene and calm him down. Then, an assistant comes over, telling Ross that someone is trying to get into the boardroom to see him and he keeps cutting her off to argue more with Sam, until Betty comes in through the doors and everyone goes silent. Ross clears the room. Sam begins to walk away and Betty asks him to stay because she overheard a bit of their conversation and wants to back him up. And since we already talked about this whole scene earlier, we'll skip the details of that and get right to the main point of where all of this goes. Basically, Ross agrees to the idea of mind control being a genuine possibility, and when Sam asks him if there's anyone specific that would want to do this, anyone that could have government ties, Ross pauses as he contemplates the idea of it being Stern, but doesn't tell Sam. Instead, he tells him that he's the president and that it comes with the job. The two decide to team up to figure out what's happening as a way to test out how Sam could be in leading the new Avengers initiative and how well the two can operate together. Sam wants to have Isaiah come out of his cell and help them, but Ross refuses. Sam gets irritating, telling him they thought they came to an agreement on the mind control being a real thing. Ross agrees and says that's exactly why he wants to keep Bradley in prison, in case something like that happens again. Sam forces Ross to promise that Isaiah will be freed once this is all figured out, and Ross agrees, but Sam gives him a look of distrust. After that, Betty and Sam have their talk, and once that's done, Sam calls up the prison and speaks to Isaiah about what's happening to give him some reassurance. From there, Ross pulls Sam aside, telling them they're getting alerts of a disturbance at a secret military facility, and that he has a feeling it's connected to the attack. Sam questions why he would believe that, and Ross tells him it's because there's a secret supply of adamantium there that he didn't want any of the other countries knowing were already mined and have been being put to use to create weapons. Sam gets mad because that goes against the speech Ross gave earlier about wanting to use adamantium for other peaceful purposes. He tells Sam it isn't a good time to argue and that he needs to get over there as fast as possible and that he'll send a unit to meet him there. Sam calls up Joaquin and they fly out to the secret military base while on comms with Ross and his team. The two of them get there before the task force shows up. They get in and Ross tells them not to look at anything when they get in there and to simply arrest the intruders and wait for backup. But as Joaquin and Sam make it further down into this facility, the comms start to cut in and out slowly. And when Sam and Joaquin find all the leaders' research, Ross begins to freak out, telling them to abort and not look any further. Then the comms go out. They look through all the files and see the research for the pills and find grainy videos of Ross with Stearns torturing him into working for him. At this moment, a voice is heard from the back talking to them, and as the voice gets closer, we get the full reveal of the leader. The scene pretty much goes on the same, but this is obviously happening much sooner than in Brave New World, so we can start building a connection to the character. But there is going to be an added piece of dialogue where Stearns talks about how he is shocked to see Sam working for Ross, especially after everything that has happened between the two of them. Citing how Ross turned Sam into an enemy, telling Sam that Ross has done the same to him, and that he heard the conversation that Ross and Sam had about restarting the Avengers through tapping in on their phones. Stearns tells Sam that the government destroyed the Avengers. In fact, all the governments of the world did when they signed the Sokovia Accords. He goes on to tell him that the only reason the Avengers lost against Thanos was because they were separated, and that if they all stood together, then half the universe wouldn't have died. He continues to tell him that sure, everyone came back, but was it because the Avengers asked world leaders to fix everything? Or was it because they themselves chose to correct the mistakes put upon them? He tries to make the point that Sam would still be dead right now if world governments continued to intervene with the Avengers after the blip, and asks him if he can sleep well at night, knowing that he would go back to work for the same system that failed him. From there, we do the classic bad guy asking to team up with the good guy, and Sam doesn't necessarily tell him no, but instead uses his VA experience to talk to Stearns and get a better understanding of him and his goals. Stearns explains that he doesn't want to take over the world, but wants to give it to the people that deserve to run it. So no more people have to get hurt by their governments. That people deserve to be taken care of by them. He wants to be the leader of a movement to start a new world order, but doesn't want to be the one in charge. And that he would love to start a new Avengers with Sam in charge, having him do it the way he believes is right. Sam asks him how exactly he wants to do that, and Stearns tells him that he has to burn the old order down first to start a new one. And Sam asks if that involves people dying, and Stearns replies with a simple, "Of course." Sam shakes his head. "See, I can't work with that, Stearns." Sam tries to help him, saying that they could release everything Ross has done and get him locked up and help free Stearns so he can go back to helping the world through his scientific mind. Stearns doesn't want that and tells him that it was a shame they couldn't see eye to eye, and walks out of the room while Sam and Joaquin chase after him right into the Serpent Society. There's a big fight with Sam while Joaquin downloads all the files he can get from Stearns' computer on a thumb drive he finds lying around. They're able to escape, and as they're coming out of the facility, the comm signal is coming back into place as Ross is screaming for them to abort the mission. An aircraft with the strike force is coming in from above, and Sam and Joaquin look at each other, and then down at the hard drive. They nod, rip their earpieces out of their ears, and take off flying. From there we cut to a war room, with Ross looking at monitors of the two of them flying away and throws a rage fit, and then begins to start panicking and tries to calm down while taking his pills. He collects himself, and then he tells his agents that Captain America and the Falcon are now fugitives, possibly working with the unknown enemy, which starts a manhunt. Then there's a big action scene with Sam and Joaquin against the task force, which then concludes the first act of New World Order. Alright, so everything has been pretty much the same with how the story plays out, with some minor changes here and there. Continuing into the second act, we pick up with the leader in some hideout, talking to Sharon about their philosophies and the plan going forward, which has the rest of the Serpent Society already landing in places all around the world. You get the sense that they see him as this larger-than-life leader, almost a cult-like fascination with him. He expresses his gratitude to all of them, promising them that they will have a life free from corruption. Sharon asks how they're going to deal with Captain America, and Stearns tells her he knew he would never accept his offer to work together, but at least wanted him to see what Ross has done, and figured that even if he didn't join his side, that he would react the way he just did, causing Ross to have to go after him while he continues on with their plan. After that, Joaquin and Sam break Isaiah out of prison, and they have to convince Isaiah to help them defeat the leader and expose Ross. Our next scene is Ross and his vice president having an argument about what was really in that bunker and why he didn't know about it. Ross refuses to tell him, and the argument continues, and once again, the panic attack begins in Ross, and he runs out of the room, fleeing the conversation, and looks at himself in a bathroom mirror, taking out his pills, but calms down, controlling his breathing and putting the pills back in his pocket. When he gets out, he's notified about Bradley's breakout at the hands of Sam. Ross does not want to bring too much attention to Sam going behind his back because of the fear that the other world leaders might see him as weak and pull out of the treaty, or worse, discover that he's been mining adamantium behind all of their backs to create weapons. So he orders Sam's capture in secret. As we move further into the second act, we find ourselves in a scene where Sam goes to Betty for advice about how to handle the Ross and leader situation, where she gives him a brief rundown of what she remembers about Stern, mainly how he wanted to use his research to end diseases and help the world. She talks about how deep down inside everyone wants to be a hero, but a lot of people can't find the right way to do it. That they allow their emotions to take control over what should be done, and that it gets in the way of their respective goals or ideals. Sam takes this in and nods his head. Betty then asks him if he thinks there's any good in her father. And he thinks about it and answers, "As Captain America, I have to believe there's good in everyone. If not, then I shouldn't hold this shield." Betty smiles and tells him that she can try to help Sam with getting Ross to work with him, at least to take down Stearns. At the end of their conversation, a bunch of police cars come out and surround Sam, Betty, Joaquin, and Isaiah. They all get on guard, and the person in charge of the task force Ross sent out talks to them, telling them to surrender and come in with them to go see Ross. As Sam looks at Betty and nods his head in agreement, everyone's phones start playing the Mr. Blue song, and Sam looks around in confusion as all the agents begin to act strangely. He yells at Isaiah to cover his ears as he's piecing together what's happening. Shooting breaks out, and our group has to take over. There could be a really awesome set piece to Mr. Blue as the agents chase the group through a crowded public place, and Sam and Joaquin have to not only keep Isaiah and Betty safe, but save civilians that are in harm's way. And that can cause an extremely intense scene having to do both things. Around halfway through the fight, Isaiah gets corrupted by the music, and Sam now has to find a way to subdue him, but is obviously overpowered by Bradley's strength. Sam gets his ass beat, which once again makes him want to take the serum. Ross is in his war room, seeing everything go down, yelling at his task force to stop because his daughter and civilians are in harm's way. But since they're being mind controlled, they aren't going to listen. He gets a phone call on his phone, and he picks it up. It's the leader, taunting him, telling him if he sees what's happening to his daughter, and asks him if he's only going to sit there and watch them kill her. The leader hangs up, and Ross gets on a coaxial helicopter with another military team and flies into downtown Washington, D.C., against the best wishes of all the cabinet members and his VP. We cut back to the action as Sam uses his vibranium wings to knock out Isaiah and drag him somewhere safe as he helps Joaquin in the fight. The leader with Sharon watch from afar, and Sharon asks if they will be joining the battle. He says no. She asks what they're doing there then. He tells her it's better to see their work complete in person to have true satisfaction. Ross's copter sets down with his military backup, and he begins yelling at his other task force to stand down, and they obey him as their mind control is lifted. He yells at them all and runs up to Betty and hugs her, saying he's sorry for what happened. Sam interrupts, attempting to tell Ross about the mind control, but he cuts him off, telling them that none of this would have happened if he followed orders, and how he's gonna lock him up back in the raft. Then Betty starts to freak out, telling Ross the same thing. It cuts back to Stern, smiling, and then saying, "Send them in." Then a swarm of reporters appear out of nowhere, asking about the reports that have come in. Ross is getting overwhelmed, and his Secret Service and military unit starts pushing people back, and civilians start to crowd in too, making him even more stressed. Joaquin comes over to Sam and nudges him, showing him his phone. An hour earlier, the media let the public know about Ross's crimes, and the reporters have been sent by the leader to document what happens next. Ross continues to freak out and tries to take his pills as the crowd swarms him. He eventually gets overwhelmed to the point where he turns into the Red Hulk, swatting the entire crowd and killing them. He begins to go on a rampage right in the middle of the city, and Sam orders the military to help the wounded as he flies over to stop Ross. Joaquin stays back to help civilians too. Sam and Red Hulk have their tumble, while Sam not only tries to not get killed, but also save people in the crossfire of Ross's Hulk out. Sam is able to use his wings to cut through the Red Hulk, something he takes note of. Eventually, Sam gets beat pretty bad with his suit and wings ripped apart, and as a last-ditch effort to save himself, he throws his shield at Ross, who catches it and throws it to the ground. Sam, wounded, starts stumbling backwards as the red hulking beast moves towards him. Ross lifts his two fists up, ready to strike down Sam, who closes his eyes, waiting for the impact to kill him, when we hear the familiar sound of a vibranium shield get thrown through the sky, hitting Ross on the back of the head, bouncing off him onto the ground and right into the hands of Isaiah Bradley. Ross turns around and begins to run towards Bradley as the two of them begin to fight. Bradley uses his speed and agility to dodge all of Ross's hits and keeps throwing the shield at him. Sam screams at Isaiah to use the ripped off wings to cut Ross, so Bradley ends up cutting up Ross pretty bad and stabbing him right in the stomach. As Ross looks down in horror, he falls over on his back, and Isaiah, with one hand pushing the wings farther into Ross, uses his second hand to beat Ross's face in with the shield repeatedly until Ross gets knocked out and slowly comes back to his human form. Onlookers slowly come out and are amazed by Isaiah and begin to cheer him, which catches him off guard, as he doesn't understand what's happening. And when he finally does, he cries, and Sam comes up to him and holds him. From there, Ross is incarcerated as the vice president comes down to see it go through, and from there, takes Sam to the war room to have him brief him on everything that he knows. Reports of the Red Hulk rampage and killings get replaced with more news reports coming in on the screen about how all the countries are now at Tiamat and are prepared to go to war over adamantium to secure their country's future in the world. He tells Sam that they're going to need all the help they can get if they're going to stop World War III. The next scene will be Sam going to talk to Ross, who's held in a special Hulk containment cell. He runs over towards Sam, asking if Betty is okay, and he tells him, "No thanks to you." Ross slumps down and walks away from the glass, sitting on a bench. Irritated, he projects his shame and anger onto Sam. "Are you here to gloat? Maybe you can get some pleasure in seeing me in a cell after what I did to you." Sam rolls his eyes, telling him he's here to get information about Stearns. Ross tells him there's nothing he has to say to him. They get into another argument, and it leads Sam to yelling at him. "The only reason I'm here trying to talk to you instead of going out there to dig up information myself is because your daughter believes that somewhere deep down inside you want to do the right thing and be a better person. So stop letting your ego get in the damn way for once and prove to her that you can be that person. Even with all the horrible things you've just done, even with all the lies you've orchestrated, you have a chance right now, right here, to change that. It's not too late. Please." Ross is taken aback and has to do some real reflecting, which leads him to think about how he's treated Betty, Stearns, the people around him, the guilt of killing those people as Red Hulk, which gets him to eventually tell Sam about how he's kept Stearns a hostage for years to help him solve government issues, create weapons, and of course to solve his heart issue. Sam tells him that when Ross got put under custody, they sent the pills that was on his person to a lab where they found high doses of gamma radiation. Ross continues to explain that he promised to release Stearns once he gained presidency if he helped him get there, and he ended up not keeping his word, causing all the chaos thus far. Sam tries to see if Ross can give him any information on how to stop him. Ross pauses and thinks how to help. Ross once again gets silent and defensive until he decides to open up his mouth. The main project Stearns has been assigned to at the moment has been creating AI robotic soldiers for the military using the already mined adamantium. He called them his humanoids. Why? I don't know. Maybe he got it from an old show or cartoon. I don't really give a shit. But the DoD had a different name for them. They called them Sentinels. Sam nods his head. So you wanted to create artificially intelligent war robots because that worked out so well for the last guy that tried to do that. Sam continues on. Did the DoD know about Stearns and help cover up your little messed up petting zoo? Ross replies with, no. They only knew the designs were coming from a contracted weapons designer who would remain anonymous. And Sam replies back with, and how were you able to get that little lie to work? Ross replies to Sam with, because I'm the president of the United States. Sam nods again and he realizes that the humanoids are most definitely gone with Stearns, and Ross agrees. They talk about how many Stearns helped make. Ross tells him about 20. Sam freaks out believing that the leader will be using the Sentinels to attack major cities. Eventually their conversation gets them to the realization that Stearns wants to give the Sentinels to all the world governments currently at a standoff in front of Tiamat so they can all destroy each other and start World War III. Since earlier on in the film, after Ross's assassination attempt, he knew a good deal of countries had to reschedule their treaty meeting due to other meetings with their military defensive teams. Sam walks away from Ross, who asks him what he's gonna do. Sam replies with, I'm gonna be putting a team together. After this scene concludes, we see the leader leave a plane from someone he mind-controlled onto a military base with Sharon and one of his Sentinels that have LED lights flashing from it with the Mr. Blue song playing from attached speakers, controlling anyone that comes near the bot as the soldiers attempt to shoot at it with no success of damaging the Sentinel. Stearns makes his way into the base and is on comms with the other members of the Serpent Society who are now across the world with Sentinels infiltrating government bases with the help of other undercover agents Stearns has hired throughout his plan. All agents hiding in their governments waiting for this day. They used the planned weapons meetings to not give them up to the governments, but instead to use this time to invade into their bases. From there, each team is able to use their Sentinels to help kill or mind control those around them. The leader has all of his teams across the world give orders through the mind-controlled government officials to attack another country at the Tiamat standoff, and before you know it, they're all attacking each other, and World War III has begun. All the countries are now fighting one another, and it's pure chaos as Stearns sees everything through monitors and smiles. We get a small set piece with the boats and planes fighting. Sam attempts to tell the vice president about his plan, but it's all cut off in the chaos of what's happening at Tiamat. The end of the second act begins when Sam recruits Joaquin, Bradley, pulls Clint Barton out of retirement once again, Bucky, and one Bruce Banner, who I guess is still Smart Hulk in the MCU, so we'll just keep that, to all come together to stop the countries from fighting. Sam needs a new suit, so he goes to his HQ to get one and ends up giving Isaiah a spare cap suit and a prototype holographic shield. They have another conversation about whether or not taking up the Cap mantle is worth it, and Sam gives Bradley an encouraging speech. But Sam himself still feels like he isn't up to the task to stopping a world war if he doesn't have the super soldier serum. Bucky, sensing this, gives him the same pep talk from Brave New World. After that, Bruce and Betty have a one-on-one catching up, and it's a sweet moment and everyone gets the butterflies in their stomach. Until, with Stearns and his agents around the world controlling their bases, he gets a hold of someone who has the keys to America's nuclear missiles. He talks to his team from all over the world to tell him when they have all secured their respective locations. And once they have, each team has their country launch all of their nuclear weapons. Back at the White House, officials begin to panic as they are getting alerts of not just America's nukes, but any country that has nuclear power has launched their missiles. Sam gets the notice and stands still in shock, thinking this is the end of the world. He pulls out his phone and calls his sister, stepping aside. She picks up, and he begins to cry, telling her that he loves her, and that she needs to get her kids together and hold each other. As she asks why, he doesn't want to scare her, so he tells her just to listen to him. and not hang up the phone, repeating that he loves her so much, while falling to the floor in tears. While his emotions build up, he hears someone from behind him say that all the nukes have left the atmosphere. Sam looks around with his sister still on the phone, and then every screen in the office cuts to a broadcast of the leader still on the military base he controls. Stearns is broadcasting worldwide except for anyone who is fighting at Tiamat, keeping them in the dark, with other languages having subtitles underneath for them to read, explaining that all their countries have failed them and decided to fight over some commodity and put all their citizens in danger of war. So he took over their operations and launched all the world's nuclear warheads into space to save the world from their country's damnation. He begins to give a speech about how all their governments have failed them while making themselves more powerful and more corrupt. He appeals to the citizens of the world by talking about how their country's leaders make millions of dollars doing nothing to benefit the people they are supposed to represent, while all of the population suffers to make any money or have healthcare or own a decent home. He backs up from the camera and has his sentinel and agents execute all of the mind-controlled officials. He calls for an uprising, promising that he will bring the Earth a new world order, that the world will be unified as one instead of multiple corrupt countries, promising a world controlled by the population, not by tainted establishments only interested in the benefit of itself. From there, we conclude the second act as the third act begins with riots around the world of citizens storming government buildings. Sam's little pseudo-Avengers unite and head for Tiamat. The start of the final battle is basically a Top Gun-style dogfight with Joaquin and Sam, while Clint, Bruce, Isaiah, and Bucky are trying to calm down the other boats. It ends up with the team de-escalating the fight by showing governments a video of the leader's speech, causing a ceasefire. After the battle, Sam gets notified on the leader's current whereabouts in DC, which is still the military base he overtook. Once the team gets there to confront and arrest Stearns, his sentinel protects him, and then eventually mind controls everyone into standing still, but having their conscious mind aware. He explains to them that even though he didn't truly get to oversee his new world order, it doesn't matter, because he knew that he most likely wouldn't have been able to achieve his goal on that high of a task. What he really wanted to do was lead the world into a new world order by exposing the weakness these governments have and showing the people that they themselves can take the power back if they chose to. He just wanted to plant the idea of a new world order being a real possibility. And by the looks of it, the citizens of the world took the bait and began to uprise. And once you put that idea of a weak establishment that can be pushed around, you can't put that idea back. That deep down inside, Stearns' plan wasn't to take over the world. He just wanted to get his revenge on Ross and destroy his legacy. And do the same for all the others that have been hurt by their corrupt governments. Then go hide out and find peace. That's why he was banking on the team, especially with the Hulk, to show up, because he knew after showing his hand through the broadcast and launching the nukes, it would be hard to escape. So he decides to use a mind-controlled Hulk as a distraction to get away and find the peace he so desires. Sharon as well also leaves. Banner goes on a rampage while the team attempts to calm him down, and the leader escapes, but not before he stops and takes a look, admiring the work he has accomplished. From there, Ross gets wind of what's happening, and he talks to his vice president, asking him to send him in there so he can take on the Hulk before anyone else gets hurt. The vice president thinks he's absolutely nuts and tells him that isn't happening. Ross explains that everyone knows the rule about mind control. There's only two ways to stop someone: kill them or knock them out, and they don't have anything to do either to Banner. The only chance they have is to unleash the Red Hulk to hit Banner hard enough to knock him out and reset his conscious mind. Ross tells his VP that right now, the Hulk is in a secluded enough area away from civilians, but only for the time being. The VP asks him, "Alright, you stop Banner, but who stops you?" Ross takes a deep breath. "In the fight with Wilson, his wings were able to cut me. Hell, Bradley stabbed me right in the gut. When it's all over, have Wilson use his fancy wings to cut my head off." The vice president is in shock. He tells him why he would want to do such a thing. Ross tells him that for once in his life, he wants to do something good. That above all, for even one time, even if it's his last, he wants to make his daughter proud. Eventually the VP agrees, but he asks him how he'll know that he won't immediately rampage away from the fight. Ross tells him, in turn, that Banner and him were in the same predicament once, and that Banner told him that he didn't need to control the Hulk inside of him. Rather, he would target it against his enemy. This convinces the vice president enough to go through with the plan. He lets Sam in on it, but he doesn't like the idea of having to kill Ross when it's all over. But at the moment, they have no other choice to help take down the Hulk, since the last fight with the Hulk didn't go too well for Sam, and he nearly died. We then get a badass Red Hulk versus Hulk fight. Red Hulk wins by knocking Banner out cold, and when Sam has to go in for his rematch, Betty comes in and calms down her father the way Natasha had to do for Banner. Ross comes back to human form and turns himself back into the authorities. And of course from there, he gets locked up in the raft. The final battle is complete, and we have an epilogue about the state of the world now being in shatters, and that the world governments are fractured. A new treaty has been put into place by the vice president, now promoted to president, that no countries are to explore Tiamat any further for the time being. We see the arc complete for Ross, as we get pretty much a similar scene where it's him and Betty talking at the raft. We then get a scene where Sam is pulled aside by the new president, telling him that he was excellent during this crisis and wants to give him the same offer Ross gave him at the beginning of the film. A shot at reforming and leading a new Avengers roster, while also being provided the super soldier serum created by Stearns. Sam smiles, thinks to himself, and decides to take the position, creating a new Avengers team. But he decides to decline the serum. For what makes a Captain America isn't his power or abilities. It's being a good person with a humble heart who only wants to see the world and its people continue forward. We then cut to an Age of Ultron style scene where Sam has a new Avengers HQ and has a new team consisting of Bruce Banner's Hulk, Thor, Ant-Man, Wasp, Wong, Shang-Chi, Shuri's Black Panther, Miss Marvel, Cassie Lang, and Kate Bishop. We then get our final scene in the film, where we see the leader, alone, in a small foresty village-like town, in a humble and quiet cottage, relaxing in an early morning, sitting in a chair, with a cup of coffee, reading a book, listening to the birds chirp, and breathing in the air on his front porch. Tears begin to stroll down his face as he smiles and relishes in being free. He wipes his tears, closes his book, walks up into his front door, closing it behind him. He has won, and he's finally at peace. The camera pans up above the cottage, above the village, above the trees, to a castle in the background above a hill overseeing the entire village. The castle of Dr. Doom. The post-credit scene will be inside the castle, getting us our first glimpse of Dr. Doom only from a voice as the camera slowly pans into an empty throne chair. And that concludes Captain America: New World Order. Alright, so obviously I'm not a professional screenwriter yet, and if I had multiple months versus the few days I had to write this, I'm sure we'd have an even better and more polished and refined version of this outline, with probably a bit more of an emphasis on the individual members of the Serpent Society, and some smaller scenes connecting how the leader was able to place agents in world governments, and what they did to manipulate them behind the scenes. But even though this is an extremely rough outline done in a few days, I do think it is exceptionally better than the final product that was given to us. And I'm sure deep down inside, this is close to the movie Marvel originally wanted to make. But like a lot of their projects, they rushed it into production too fast and didn't have the time to flesh out the right script. But I hope at the very least this was an entertaining, maybe even a bit cringy at times, but overall fun video of an alternate version of this film that let the leader shine, let Sam have a more fulfilling arc, let Isaiah Bradley have a spotlight, had more fun with the concepts they established, and had an actual impact on the MCU going forward. But that's it. So thank you for watching and all that good shit.